So we're driving. We get to these checkpoints. There's checkpoints every 500 meters in the city. And the Taliban, they look in the car, see if you've got anything weird, and maybe pull you out. So quite rare they actually pull you out, but they did on one checkpoint we're at. This guy comes over, he's patting me down, and I say a few words of Pashto to him. He looks back at me and is all excited, starts blabbering in Pashto, and I'm like, oh, crap. English. Oh, English. English. Okay. Guy comes over, full gear, AK, looks at us and goes, oh, hi, guys. How you doing? Well, what the hey, mate. Yeah, we're from England. And he goes, oh, I'm from Canada. What? You joined the Taliban? And he's like, yeah, I came over to fight the jihad. My parents moved to Canada, and I grew up there, and it was terrible, Kufar. And we're like, okay, buddy. So we're chatting away. We're trying to get an interview. And he's like, no. And we're like, oh, okay, we're going to have to head off then. And the driver taps us and is like, we got to go now. I'm like, oh, okay. Hey, see you, guy. And he's like, bye. Get back to the car, drive off. We're like, what was the problem? He said, oh, the older Taliban in the back were looking at you two white boys with blue eyes and muttering about how beautiful you are.
Oh, my God.
We're like,
oh, my
okay.
God.
Because you've got no recourse if they want to take you. What are you going to do? Cry?
Oh, my
Like, they've got
God.
guns.
Yesterday, I told you about this crazy word super injunction, which is an injunction that you can't even talk about because there's an injunction covering the injunction, and maybe another super duper injunction is needed, so you can't even talk about that one. What's so insane about the super injunction, it was the British government itself that asked the courts to silence any coverage of what they were doing. This was not some private legal matter. This was not protecting the identity of someone who was alleged to have committed or been a victim of, say, a sexual offense, and maybe confidentiality would be appropriate. This was a government engaged in a massive secret airlift of tens of thousands of Afghans, allegedly translators, though we read that there were only 1,000 interpreters total. And the flights and the accommodation and the expenditure of £7 billion, which is more than 10 billion Canadian dollars, that is what was made secret over the course of an election. And it was the Conservative government that kept it a secret first. And then the Labour government that won the election agreed to keep it a secret. Such an astonishing thing. And I thought, let's talk to a Brit who knows a little bit about the strange goings on of their government. You might recall our last interview with our guest today was when he was arrested, or detained at least, and subject to hours of grilling about his journeys around the world. No charges laid, just the abuse of the Terrorism Act, which we know from our friend Tommy Robinson can be used for any reason or no reason, just to subject you to questions for 6 hours, and you have no right to remain silent. There are some quite quirky things about the UK. You wouldn't believe they were the cradle of freedom of speech not long ago. Joining us now to talk a little bit about what Afghanistan is like and what many of these thousands of new Brits might be like is Callum Darragh, a journalist and travel adventurer journalist, I would say. Callum, great to see you again.
Good to see you again, man. Been well?
I'm doing well. I am doing slightly better as a Canadian, I think, than I would be doing if I was a Brit. If I was a Brit, I would have my faith in democracy shaken that two different opposing parties can collude with the courts to silence any discussion or any knowledge about such a key factor. Even MPs were barred from knowing it. How does that make you feel as a Brit? I mean, I'm not picking on you. You're just the only Brit I know who's been to Afghanistan. We'll talk about that later. What do you think of this whole super injunction story?
Well, I mean, for a while, pretty much everyone I know now considers the British government deeply illegitimate as an organization because, as you mentioned, the two major parties colluded on this. It's not the first thing they've colluded on. And what are they colluding to do? Well, everything they can, seemingly, to destroy the native population. Just anything against their interest seems to be what they want. And then you have this extra aspect of censoring it. Like you say, the super injunction. It's a huge deal. And it's not the first time they've done super injunctions or weird censorship or cracking down on people who say the wrong things. You know, visiting pensioners for criticizing government policy. And then saying they're going to charge them with hate crime legislation. I mean, there's just so many layers to this, and the average British person now is just so done, just utterly finished with the people in the establishment. I mean, you see the rising support for reform. And they were always considered a bit of a protest party. And that protest is fundamentally, we're done with the entire former elites. Like, every single one of you sucks.
Yeah. It's astonishing to me how Reform UK under Nigel Farage is doing in so many of these council elections. I actually went to a by-election up north, a seat that became vacant because the Labour MP was caught beating up someone on videotape. He had to resign. There was a by-election. It was one of the safest Labour seats in the country, and it flipped to Reform. And I went there and I saw the very simple slogan, Callum. It was, freeze immigration, stop the boats. I think that is what resonated. And I think ordinary Brits who sort of are apolitical or non-political, or even in the past have been sort of Labourite, I think they're saying this is so out of control. So the timing of this revelation, people are primed to be against immigration. I think they really did try and avoid this becoming an election issue. I really think that the media party, the court party, and the political parties colluded to keep this out of the election. I think this would have given Reform UK many more than the half dozen seats they got. What do you make of the timing of all this? Was it an election suppression thing? What do you think what do you think the effects will be from now forward?
I'm trying to recall the exact timing of when they made it censored, but the feeling I get from watching people who have interacted with the state, I mean, the main person people should look to right now is Dominic Cummings.
Right.
So he used to be a special advisor to Boris Johnson, and he spent the last month basically going out and doing these interviews saying, hey guys, here's how the state actually works at a granular level. And the fundamental premise is always covering up Whitehall's fuck-ups.
Right. And Whitehall is sort of
terrible.
Whitehall is the senior bureaucrats. Is that right?
Yeah. So basically his description is that when the Conservative Party were in charge, what's the weird aspect is that none of the ministers or the prime minister wanted to run the country. They wanted to win the election and then do media stuff. So the actual running of the country was left to bureaucrats, and bureaucrats, they have their own objectives. So they just do those, and those objectives don't align with the public. Big surprise. So when it comes to them censoring this is very similar to the grooming gangs, where a lot of the censorship was permitted and greenlit because it was showing failures within the system. If the bureaucrats were being shown to be effing up their job and not protecting the British people because the system is corrupt, that's when they'd institute censorship. And this is exactly the same situation.
We try and be open-minded to all people in the world. That's sort of a Western trait, is to be hospitable and to give people the benefit of the doubt. And there's a very British notion of fair play and I think being on the positive side of things. I was in Eastern Europe a year or so ago, and actually it's also, I was in Iraq, and not as dramatically as you were, but I was told that I was too smiley. I smiled too easily, and I said, thank you very much for trifles. It was just a habit. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And I was told, you're coming across as an idiot because you're being effusive in your language. Over here, you look like a dummy who can be conned and tricked because you're so goofy and Western and you're treating everyone naively. I was sort of scolded for being, hey, hi, thanks, please. And I think that's the difference between living in a high trust society where everyone is sort of hail fellow well met and a stranger is just a friend you haven't met yet. Whereas if you're in Erbil, Iraq, like I was, or even in parts of Eastern Europe, it's a tougher, harsher world. And I think any country that would open itself up to ordinary Afghan peasant, Afghanistan annual GDP per capita, $450. Any country that would bring in tens of thousands of Afghan men with their views on women and their views on rape and their views on homosexuality and their views on, theft and their views on crime. I think you're the dopey Westerner who's, come on in, guys. What could go wrong? I think that the Afghans are amongst the most, and I'm saying this not as a prejudice, but as an observation, the crime rate committed by Afghans in Germany and in UK and in Sweden and other places where it's tracked is 10, 20, 30, 40 times higher than for the domestic populations. Am I wrong on that?
No, I mean, those facts are been known for at least 10 years now. Ever since the migrant crisis started, we had loads of Afghans coming over. And I mean, to anyone who'd been to Afghanistan, it wasn't a shock. Massive increased rates of rape, sexual assault, violence. And it was like, well, okay, now that we know that information, what do we do with it? That's usually what you do. But every Western nation took the position of, oh, that's interesting. Let's just bring more of them. Which is just mad. Which is absolutely madness.
I want to play a clip very briefly. I showed this yesterday. This is a Vice documentary showing British officers dealing with their Afghan counterparts. And they were raising the sensitive subject that every night the Afghan leaders would rape young boys. And the screams of those boys would wake up the British and in some cases American and Canadian troops. And that was just how it is. Here's a clip from a Vice documentary in Afghanistan.
Before that briefing had happened, Major Stuber knew that 3 young boys had been shot dead on police patrol bases. All 3 of them were Chai boys. So young boys who had been abducted by the police commanders and were used as servants. They served tea, but also sex slaves. They're raped by the police commanders. And you see them on every base. You see several boys, sometimes in uniform, sometimes not, but 13, 14 years old. It's very common practice there. 3 of them had been shot dead by the police, 1 possibly by another Chai boy, nobody's quite sure. And he's just found out that a 4th boy has been shot at point blank range in the leg for trying to escape. And I was there, so he let me follow him to meet the acting police chief and confront him about this.
Yesterday, we had unfortunate news come in. A young boy, about 13, maybe 14 years of age, was shot. Now, there's a couple of things on there that you and I have talked about. We've had all the PV commanders in this very room about having young boys and civilians on PVs.
I have mentioned it more than 20 times.
I know. Why was there a boy on that PV? What did that commander say to you?
I have heard that information, that knowledge that the, quote, allies of the West were raping boys has been a source of PTSD for many soldiers who encountered it. Tell me about your own travels to Afghanistan. Is rape culture that normal? Like you saw that Afghan leader saying, "What do you want me to do? Screw a grandma, these boys." It's like he was defiant. He was almost boastful about it. He wasn't denying it. He wasn't ashamed by it. He was saying, "This is how we do it here." What do you make of that?
Well, I'll tell you a story. So we're driving down in Kabul, and it's me, my friend Lord Miles, and then we've got a taxi driver who's an Afghan. Interesting other story. That guy had broken into Europe back in 2016, and then came back to Afghanistan because he wasn't actually fleeing anything. He was just bored. Whole other story. So we're driving. We get to these checkpoints. There's checkpoints every 500 meters in the city. And the Taliban, they look in the car, see if you've got anything weird, and maybe pull you out. So quite rare they actually pull you out, but they did on one checkpoint we're at. This guy comes over, he's patting me down, and I say a few words of Pashto to him. He looks back at me and is all excited, starts blabbering in Pashto, and I'm like, oh, crap. English. Oh, English. English. Okay. Guy comes over, full gear, AK, looks at us and goes, oh, hi, guys. How you doing? Well, what the hey, mate. Yeah, we're from England. And he goes, oh, I'm from Canada. What? You joined the Taliban? And he's like, yeah, I came over to fight the jihad. My parents moved to Canada, and I grew up there, and it was terrible. Kufar. And we're like, okay, buddy. So we're chatting away. We're trying to get an interview. And he's like, no. And we're like, oh, okay, we're going to have to head off then. And the driver taps us and is like, we got to go now. I'm like, oh, okay. Hey, see you, guy. And he's like, bye. Get back to the car, drive off. We're like, what was the problem? He said, oh, the older Taliban in the back were looking at you 2 white boys with blue eyes and muttering about how beautiful you are.
Oh, my God.
We're like,
Oh, my
okay.
God.
because you've got no recourse if they want to take you. What are you going to do? Cry?
Oh my
Like, they've got
God.
guns. So we're talking to the driver. We're like, okay, so how common is that? I'd heard it's out here. And he says, well, it's a bit of a regional thing because Afghanistan is divided into different ethnic groups. And in the south, he says, the people down there, they're really into boy love, bakubazi, as it gets called. And you'll see them driving around sometimes, and it looks like bring your son to work day, but you know it's not their son.
Oh my God.
So we're like, okay, what about the rest of the Afghans? Do you think it's disgusting? And he said, oh yeah, up in the north, we think this is vile. A whole bunch of ethnic groups don't do this. We think it's against Islam. But the guys in the south, they don't care. It's like, oh, okay. So what do you say about it? He's like, oh, we have a saying. When a bird flies over the south, it flies with one wing because it needs the other to cover its arsehole. I'm like, all right, buddy. So we keep carrying on. We end up at the Kabul Zoo, in fact, later on in the trip. And these Taliban are looking at us, taking pictures of the animals. And they're like, oh, why are you here? What are you doing? We're like, oh, fair enough. You know, they're the government, white people, we should explain. We have tourism, blah, blah, blah. And my friend says, crack the joke to them. Say we don't like people from the south because they do boy love. And the translator goes, hang on. Blah, 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 blah. They're from Kandahar, mate. I'm not telling them the joke. They're from the south. Okay, good job. And then we ought to take pictures. And these guys are like touching our arms to, you know, carry around, take a picture. Now, us in the West, we think that's pretty normal. You and the boys, lock arms, take a photo. And Afghanistan, no. You do not touch. Put your hands to yourself. So these guys are doing this, and then we realize, oh no. Oh, they're not looking at us because we want to be friends. So then we'll make excuses. We're like, we're going to go. We've got places to be. Sorry, guys. Chat to you later. And they're like, oh, I'll talk to you later. I'm like, we go back to the compound. And I felt physically sick. Like, it's the first time I felt utterly revolted. Because not only do you know that they could do this, nothing you can do, but then also they think that's normal.
Yeah.
And they're doing this to young boys. And you're like, right. They think that's normal. They think that should be legal. And then when you get home, you research it. And it's not like it's a Taliban versus non-Taliban thing. The old government, the guys we were supporting, like you show in that clip, those were the guys we put in power. We were paying their salaries, etc. And they were doing that and thinking it's completely normal. And guess what? Those are the people you've brought to the West now. Thanks. Absolutely wonderful. I mean, I don't know why we couldn't just put them in Pakistan or Saudi or some other regional country like Kazakhstan. But instead, no, we're going to bring them to the West. Then they're going to bring that attitude. And it's not just for young girls they're going to be raping. Yeah. Young boys, they're pretty happy on, and even grown men. So it's not just your daughter you got to worry about, it's yourself.
Wow. You know, you make me remember, I wrote a book about Omar Khadr. That was a Canadian terrorist who went overseas and murdered some Americans. I got to know the psychiatrist, the forensic psychiatrist who dealt with him at Guantanamo Bay, who believes that Omar Khadr, because he was a teenager, he was raped by Al-Qaeda, Taliban. And that was the one thing in all their interrogations when it was raised, he sort of got defensive and anxious about. I totally believe it. And you can imagine how generation after generation, men who themselves were abused become abusers. And especially if the culture normalizes it, at least in Western society, sexual abuse is a taboo. It's frowned upon. If it's done, it's usually done by a predator who uses secrecy or stealth. But it sounds so open in Afghanistan. And one of the terrifying things we've learned lately about the Pakistani grooming gangs in the UK, or Syrians, is that they do it as friends, as family members, even. Like there's no shame even amongst a family. If a member of the family is engaging in rape, he calls the other family or friends over to participate in it. The craziest story I ever wrote for the Toronto Sun, and I was sort of surprised they let it through, but it was factually accurate, was a bus in Pakistan where there was a boy on it, and men at the back of the bus started raping the boy. And the bus driver, instead of calling the cops, pulled the bus over and joined in. The Western high trust society that we've taken centuries to build, if a woman says, help, help, men come and help. But in this mindset of the rape culture, help means get in on it. And we don't realize how many centuries it took us as the West to build a culture where women are safe, where the default is to respect and protect women, that a taxi driver who picks up a drunk woman at the bar at 1 a.m. to take her home, his instinct is protective, not take advantage. So many cases of taxis, including in Halifax, Nova Scotia, Canada, a series of rape charges against taxi drivers from Arabia who just can't believe that the men would let their women out. I mean, the whole idea of a male guardian and dressing women in a burqa is that's how you defend against this rape culture. How do you raise a woman in the rape culture? Well, you put a sack over her and you make sure she's never out of reach of a man. It's insane. And that's being brought to the UK by the tens of thousands.
I think the number is now, whilst they include the extended family you come with, up to 150,000.
Yeah.
So that's a whole town.
Yeah.
That just forever is now going to be Afghan. Thanks. Great.
Yeah.
And the aspect you say there about women, hey, it's not just women.
Yeah.
You've also, as you mentioned, the boys.
Yeah.
And with me being there, grown adults, also fair game.
Yeah.
It's you've all got to be worried about that.
Yeah.
But getting to Canada, I just want to mention, they mentioned of that 150,000 that are coming, they said, oh, well, we had to keep it all secret. And part of the reason for that is we didn't do any checks. We didn't know who these people are. So they say they're an interpreter. I mean, some of them said they were cooks, which I'm not really sure how serving a British guy a meal entitles you to an infinite permanent residence in Britain, but whatever. So then you've got people who are just lying.
Yeah.
And then they came out and said, oh, by the way, some of the people we did let in, we actually had done checks on, because that was before we ran out of time. We knew there was security risk and we brought them in anyway. So now they're here. So we've just got terrorists here. Like, great, thanks.
I understand that one of the Afghans who sort of threatened to extort the Ministry of Defense by shopping some list to Taliban, he himself, the extorter, was allowed in. I mean, is there any way to reverse this? Well, first, let me ask you this. The news sources I follow are often citizen journalists like yourself, podcasters, bloggers, alternative media, and there were a couple of, I call them mainstream media, who were actually trying to get this super injunction lifted. Now, they went big on the story, it's true. But when I checked the BBC homepage, they were trying to downplay this story tremendously. There was some, cooking show that was the story of the day or something. This should be, in my view, the biggest story in the United Kingdom. It should be such a scandal that an election should be held, because they deprive the people of, I think, what could have been the most important election issue. That's how I feel over here in Canada, though. What does it look like in the UK? Has this permeated into ordinary conversation? Has the media tried to dampen it, or is this a wild story?
So online and in right-wing media, it exists. On the BBC, it was wiped from the front page. It just wasn't there, just like you say. As for a solution, I mean, I mentioned Canada because I mentioned there was terrorists come to the UK. When I was in Afghanistan, there was a guy running the compound we're in, and he had some level of security clearance. He was looking us up. So we're hanging out with him after he's cleared us up. And we're like, oh, buddy, what are you going to do for work? Because there's like no one in this hotel. It's just us. So he says, yeah, that's how it's going. So I'm looking up security work right now. There's a guy who wants to hire me in Canada, because Canada has let in loads and loads of people, the exact same situation, and they also did no checks. Like, what? He's like, yeah, so they're hiring anyone who has any expertise in Afghanistan to check who these people are for counterterrorism purposes. Never mind the other risks that involve that we talked about.
Yeah.
So I'm like, oh, okay. So when I get home, it turns out in Canada, the Taliban is still listed as a terrorist organization.
Right.
I don't know if that's still the case, but it was 3 years ago when I was talking about this. And watching things play out, I mean, this is going to be controversial for some people, but honestly, keep in mind, in Afghanistan, there is no choice between the Taliban government and liberal democracy where there's women's rights and blah, 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 and all this, fantasy. The options in Afghanistan are the Taliban or ISIS.
Huh.
Okay? That's your two options for the government right now.
Yeah.
So the Taliban are in charge. And when I spoke to the Taliban at the parade we attended, I asked them what's the justification for this state. And they justified on ethnic lines, not religious. They were like, hey, we're real Afghans, we want to run Afghanistan. It's going to be an Islamic country, an Islamic state. But they weren't making these claims of, we're going to take over the whole world. There was just one guy there who claimed that he was not part of the organization. So when I look at Afghanistan, what they've done since, they issued an amnesty for those who fought against the government. Some of them then tried to organize a resistance movement, so they got killed. Big surprise. The Russians have just declared that they recognize Afghanistan, the Islamic State, the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan. It's the new Taliban government. They're the first country to do it. So they've now opened an embassy. And when I was there were British guys trying to get the contacts to reopen the British one at some point. There seems to be this understanding in international Western governments that we're going to have to recognize them at some point. They've not done anything crazy. Like, we freeze their accounts, we expect them to go on a genocide or something. They didn't do any of that. They want to work with us. We've now got massive populations of Afghans in our countries who have been convicted of rape, convicted of crimes, or are terrorists. They deserve to go home. They deserve to be deported. And we can't do that until we recognize the government of Afghanistan and organize diplomatic relations, etc., etc. So probably the solution, as unpalatable as it might be to some people, is to just recognize their rule and then start operating with them like any other country, sending back rapists and murderers and such. Now, again, this might be a bit of a bitter taste for a lot of people, but we have to accept we lost. War's over, buddy. And when you lose, you don't get to dictate the outcomes. The people there get to dictate the outcomes. And if we want to engage with that in any way, we've got two options. Work with the Taliban, who are in charge, on the opposition or ISIS, who we're just not working with, unless you're a crazy person.